Production and communication. These are the two most important ingredients in crowdfunded game development. Production to actually get the game done, and communication to tell the crowd who's funding you what's going on behind the scenes. And recently, the two most important developers for production and communication at Visionary Realms spoke very candidly about what's going on behind the scenes of Pantheon: Rise of the Fallen. Benjamin Dean is the Director of Communications for Visionary Realms, as well as the project producer for Pantheon, which in his own words means...
I look more at the big picture stuff, sort of the company, the project, corporate needs, that sort of thing. So I focus more on things like getting the departments together to plan out pre-alphas, timing of promotions, and so on.
And fan favorite Chris Joppa Perkins has the lengthy title of Creative Director and Creative and Programming Producer, which means...
But it's essentially the development side of the house, the programming and the creative efforts in their totality, and how they, coalesce, are managed, are scheduled, and as the creative director, my primary responsibility is to oversee the design direction of the game. How are all of the aspects of the game's content supporting that design direction and bringing it to life.
And both of them recently joined Ben Kilson-Walters, the community manager, which means, I'm just kidding, you know what that means. They answered questions from VIP backers about production and communication. The roundtable was over an hour long, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to go over the highlights today, or the new information and things that are most important for you to know related to the game's progress. If you don't want to be out of the loop on Pantheon's progress moving forward, hit the subscribe button now, because that's exactly what this channel is dedicated to. I'm not affiliated with Visionary Realms. I've just been following Pantheon's development for a long time, and I like to share what I learn to make it easier for you to track the project with me. So let's get into it. One of the most important things to keep in mind whenever you're talking about Pantheon's development is that Visionary Realms is a very small team, especially when it comes to developing something as massive as a full-scale MMORPG. As of this video, they currently list 3 programmers, 4 artists, and 4 designers on their team page. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that in order to complete the project sooner rather than later, they're planning to hire more people. And Ben Dean provided some insight on how they'll go about doing that.
I'm not going to go into specifics as to what those roles and hires would be, because there's always options. So we could hire them on as individual contractors, or we could outsource to a studio, say for art or something. There's always going to be options, and it really kind of depends where we are in terms of crowdfunding and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of variables in there, but we do have the list as to what we're looking for. But the other thing about hiring too is that it's a process, and it needs to be done at the right time. Like the questions that we have to ask ourselves is first, do we have work for them to do? Do we have time to onboard them if we're bringing somebody in? Do we have somebody to communicate with them if we're doing outsourcing? If we're bringing them in, do we have time to get them familiar with our internal standards, our processes, procedures, communications? As you guys know, as most of you listening to this podcast know, that we're not like most studios. We work remotely. We work in different time zones. We have a mix of part-time people and full-time people. So it takes a lot of careful planning. So it's not as black and white as we would want, but yes, we do have those lists as to who the roles that we need to fill, and of course, funding directly affects that as well.
And this process is already well underway. To review, so far this year, Visionary Realms has hired HR manager Gina Blue-Eyed Gator Rochelle, QA tester Mark Fasoya Maraglino, game designer Adam Taham Mastel, associate content creator Anthony Minus Guidi, and most recently, a new 3D environment artist.
A little while back, we had posted a tech artist hire position. We actually opted to postpone that hire because of a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about next month, actually, in regards to like the terrain development pipeline and just a lot of the tech and the tools that we've gotten in place. A lot of the initial needs we expected to have and the need for the tech artists to address those needs, we've actually we've found solutions to just about all of those things. We will eventually need a tech artist. That's part of the alpha hiring plan, but it's not. It no longer was an imminent, top of the list need. So what we did is, in opting to postpone that, we then instead moved to fill an additional 3D art position to, continue to ramp up the world building efforts. That's why we were able to move into Wild's End immediately, and I can't wait until we can show off, the work that's been done there, because it's the progress and the speed has been amazing. But we know exactly what positions we need to fill to reach alpha. We have our alpha goal. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the roundtable. A few additional times we'll circle back around to that topic. But we know what positions we need. We know the order that we plan to hire those positions in to meet those goals. And right now, a lot of it on the development side of the house really is centered on the world building and the environment development efforts, which is just in a really solid place right now. But Ben's absolutely right in that, funding obviously plays the primary role in how many people we're able to hire and, when we're able to do that. But it also is, we have to make very strategic hires because we need a certain level of expertise and familiarity with, specific tools, specific workflow, Unity engine, the HDRP, new kind of pipeline that we're moving into. And so we're making the best, most strategic hires that we can to make us as productive as possible and minimize the amount of onboarding and acclimation churn that we have to do.
It's worth pointing out that this particular hire appears to be more of a replacement rather than an addition, as Jimmy Lane, who was the senior environment artist as of August 2021, is no longer listed on their team page. But later in the roundtable, Joppa mentioned that the name of this new environment artist is Tim Schuler, and I took the liberty of finding his personal website so you can see some examples of the caliber of environments that he's worked on with previous projects. He's been an environment artist since 2008, and among other things, he's worked for ArenaNet on Guild Wars 2. But anyway, let's go back to Pantheon and the HDRP, or High Definition Render Pipeline, and terrain streaming tool that Joppa mentioned was related to this hiring move. For those of you who don't know what that is, HDRP basically allows for modern high-quality lighting, and terrain streaming basically allows for the game world to load seamlessly around you as you move about. And according to the most recent producer's letter in August 2021, both of these things, along with implementing the proprietary network code, are the primary focus right now, and it's a really critical turning point in the game's development.
Hands down, the current developments being done on the terrain streaming, the asset streaming, the world building side of things, everything from the art creation and implementation process to the speed of iteration, what I call the engine to experience turnaround time, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Just had a call last night, our world design and world development meeting that we have every Thursday night. And our senior programmer, Robert Crane, was in there, and he and Kyle are both working really tightly in tandem on that whole front. And some of the things that he was sharing with me last night, I mean, literally, it just blew my mind. I didn't really know what to say, because it's not only the result that's so amazing, but it's the way that the actual process is going to improve the speed with which we can build zones and make changes in the Unity engine and then see it reflected in a build. I mean, we're talking like 10-minute turnaround time, which is insane. But it's hard to even encapsulate how insane that is, unless you know that in the past, on this very project, in the past, we've looked at having builds there was a long period of time where we would have a new development build once every week or two to look at things. Now we do builds, we're probably averaging about 10 to 12 builds a day, and the turnaround time the thing that still takes the longest for us is making scene changes. When we work on like Wilds Inn, for example, and we go and we want to place some things down, and then commit that and roll out a build to get in there and look at it, that still takes the longest, and that's like an hour turnaround time at the most. We're going to be cutting that down to 10 minutes, like almost like in the same span of a sit down thought. Like I'm moving from working in the engine to working in the actual build, not to mention the offline player developments that are going to allow us to actually so much more in depth run around in and play the game, quote unquote, inside of Unity itself, to do a lot of our scale measuring and distance measuring, and just get boots on the ground before it even moves to the client. Plus the HDRP pipeline improvements. I'm still kind of processing like how dramatically the steps forward that we're about to make.
Of course, as was previously mentioned, all of this is a concerted effort to get the game truly ready for alpha. It's what fans have been waiting for years. The question on everyone's mind is, when is alpha?
It won't be this year. I know that some of you, some of our community and fans had been hoping and thinking that it was going to be this year.
Very wishful thinking.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't very wishful thinking. But I understand where it came from, because a few months ago, Chris Rowan did the VIP roundtable with you, and he mentioned,
in January,
if all things being equal, if we got the funding that we were hoping to get, all of that stuff, we were hoping to get it done by the year. But that, the year has happened since then.
No, and we worked hard towards that too. It's not that we didn't try.
No, and again, you're limited by what you have. So we work with what we have, particularly with finances or whatever. We're still moving forward. But anyway, it won't be this year. Again, I'll just say that right now. We do have an internal date, not as you guys are well familiar with. We're not ready to share that until we're 100% certain that we can hit it. So just keep an eye on the producers' letters for updates. I think that's really kind of your best way to sort of figure out when it's coming, because we'll be giving you a regular indication of what's been done and what's still left to do. So,
speaking of that alpha to-do list, you'll notice that each item on it is labeled with the stage of the process it's in, such as to do, design complete, in progress, or complete. There was a little bit of confusion about what these steps actually mean when it comes to implementation, so in this roundtable, Joppa elaborated on it further.
It to be a little bit more clear, but essentially to do means that it is in some form of waiting for a final approval or a ratification, in which it will go into a design complete status, meaning it is approved, it's ratified, it's holistic in terms of what is needed for implementation to happen, meaning that programming especially understands and has been consulted and has been able to feed into the viability and kind of the smoke test and the sanity check. Once it's in design complete, then it is kind of awaiting the in progress or the being implemented. And when something is in progress, that means that it has begun being implemented into the game according to the design or the tech sheet that's informing it. And then obviously when something's complete, that means that it is in the game as intended. The tricky thing about project management and why these projects are so difficult, they're just such a crazy beast of something to wrangle and wrap your mind around, and why you see game companies just on the whole everywhere delaying or having to push back or missing deadlines and things like that, is because you're talking about unless you've made a game before and you're working on like a follow-up IP, and so you already have a very, very clear sense of what works and what doesn't and what you want to do based on that previous experience. When you're creating a game like Pantheon, where some of those things are carryovers, and we know just from MMOs in general how we kind of want to shape this or do that. But when you start incorporating fresh kind of edges or ideas or ways of doing things or evolving things, there's always the process of designing and, getting collaboration and input and kind of rolling something around and ratifying a design and getting it in the game. And until you actually play it and experience it in the context that it's meant to be experienced in, you often do not see everything that you could have seen on the front end. And so when something is complete, that means that it has been implemented according to its ratified design. But it's also with the understanding that more often than not, there are going to be iterative cycles on things that become apparent over time, sometimes immediately, but sometimes over time, of how something is not quite what it should be, or certain things need to be tweaked, and so forth.
Overall, I think this was one of the most honest roundtables Visionary Realms has ever done. In several parts, they spoke very plainly about the mistakes they've made in the past and how they're learning and moving forward. It's pretty clear to me that they're making an effort to improve their communication with the community, which, as I said, is very much needed. The roundtable itself has also received a little bit of a facelift and is now a true podcast available on Spotify in addition to YouTube. So if any of this has piqued your interest, I'd highly recommend that you go listen to the full audio, which I'll provide links to in the description, because there's a lot more than I can just cover here in this short video. So until next time, stay curious and adventure on.